Hey, I just want to look at converting area units. Now, if we go back just to our basic conversion of units, like 1 kilometre is 1,000 metres, 1 metre is 100 centimetres, and 1 centimetre is 10 millimetres. So basically, if you're looking at area units, you're looking at square units. So if you look at 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre square, then that would be, that whole area is equal to 1 centimetre square. Now, instead of having it in centimetres, if you had it in millimetres, that would be 10 millimetres by 10 millimetres. So 10 by 10 would be 100. So that's 100 millimetres squared. So that means 1 centimetre squared is 100 millimetres squared. And if you think about that, 1 centimetre is 10 millimetres, and 1 centimetre squared is 10 millimetres squared. So if you look at that, not 10 millimetres squared, I mean 100 millimetres squared. So if you look at that when it was the square units, it was 10, it becomes twice as many zeros. So it was 10 by 10 instead of just 10, or 10 squared. So it's like twice as many zeros. And the same thing would happen if you had a metre squared. So if you had 1 metre by 1 metre, that's 1 times 1, that area, and that's 1 metre squared. But instead of having it in metres, if you had it in centimetres, it would be 100 centimetres by 100 centimetres, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4 centimetres squared. So you can conclude from that 1 metre squared is equal to 10,000 centimetres squares. And what's happened, like 1 metre is 100 centimetres, but 1 metre squared will be 100 by 100. So it's like twice as many zeros, because what you're really doing there is you're doing the square unit, and that's why you have to do 100 by 100. There's 100 for each side of the square. And let's just say we're looking at kilometres squares. So that would be like 1 kilometre by 1 kilometre. So 1 times 1 is equal to 1 kilometre squared. But if you change those to metres, that would be 1,000 by 1,000. So once again, the number of zeros double. So that would be 1 million metres squared. So 1 kilometre squared is 1,000 times 1,000. So the zeros double, and that would be metres squared. So let's just say you had to convert some of these. Say you have 4.83 metres squared. How many centimetres squared? Okay, so we know metre to a centimetre is 100. So 1 metre is 100 centimetres. So what that means is 1 metre squared is 100 square centimetres. So you do 100 times 100 to double the number of zeros. So if I've got 4.83 and I want to go from metres squared to centimetres squared, you times by 1 with twice the number of zeros. You go 1, 2, 3, 4. Put the eggs in the basket, and that'll be 0, 0. So we have 0.000576, and that's going to be metres squared, and I want to change that to, let's say, millimetres squared. So 1 metre, so you got metres, kilometres is 1,000, metres is 100 to centimetres, and 10 to millimetres. So that's going that way's times, that way is divide. Okay, so when you do square units, you just do it by twice the number of zeros. So you could just go times 1,000 times 1,000. That might work, I think. Or you could just do 1,000 squared. Meters squared, and this is 100 times 100 centimeters squared, and this is 10 by 10 millimeters squared. So that way you times, and backwards you divide. So if we're looking at this one, normally meters to millimeters, if you look at that, that would be meters to millimeters. Normally it would be 1 with 3 zeros, 110. But if I go meters squared to millimeters squared, so normally it would be times 100 times 10. It would be times 100 times 10. But this is 100 squared. 100 times 100, 10 times 10. So instead of being like 1,000, it ends up having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. So that means you have to times by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's actually 576 millimeters squared. And let's just look at one more. So let's go 592,000, and that's centimeters squared into kilometers squared. Okay, so if we look at the conversion table that's up the top, if I want to go from centimeters squared, I want to go back to kilometers squared, then basically, let's have a look at that. That would normally be divide by 1,000 and divide by 100. If you divide by 100, that's meters, and another 1,000 would be kilometers. So it's going to be divide by 1,000, divide by another 1,000, divide by 100, and another 100. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6. So it's 5 and 5. It would be 10 zeros. Because normally it would be that. And then we're going to do another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're just like doubling the number of zeros. So that'll be 10. So let's get this decimal point. We want to divide. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's going to be 0.0000592 kilometers squared.